Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you will consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and speech writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Sarah Zohn. We will be discussing management best practices in today's work environment. Sarah is the author of For God's Sake, Work by the Book, Management Explained from Within. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Okay, thank you. So basically, my professional journey can be titled as Management in Technology Environments. I started as an engineer many, many years ago in Israel. That's my background, engineering. And very quickly, I was directed by my management towards management. First, managing of projects, and then I was a team lead. After that, I was a manager of team leads. And after that, I moved to the United States, where eventually I found myself at the executive level of a huge company, EMC Corporation. And I spent there about 15 years. After that, which was about 10 years ago, I left the company and decided to try it on my own as a coach, as an executive coach of managers, leaders of companies that I could secure as clients. And I've done that for 10 years very successfully and very happy with that. My book is kind of a summary of all the best practices that I have practiced myself. And of course, now that I have 10 years in teaching and experimenting with my clients, I am even more confident that what I presented in the book are practices that work. And that's pretty much my professional journey.
All right. Now, I want to go back and I want to share 3 slides with our viewers. What are we looking at here?
We're looking at a banner. My book was written originally in English, but then I myself translated it into Hebrew, and that's the banner for the Hebrew version.
Okay. What is the title of the book in Hebrew, and what is the quote?
So the title of the book is a literal translation, For God's Sake, Work by the Book. And the idea behind this title is that from my experience, I've been seeing a lot of managers having difficulties in understanding what they're supposed to do in their function. And here I'm saying, first of all, let's go back to basics. So for God's sake, work by the book. The book has been written for a long time, or the collection of practices have been tried for a long time, and here it is. And the title comes from Philip Tamer, a colleague of mine who read the book, and he is now a vice president at HP. And what he is saying, and that this is an engineering accomplishment, what I have done here, and that is to put such a wide range of topics, management topics, into one book that's so practical, logical, and useful. And he ends his quote by saying this is a must book for anybody who wants to lead in a commercial or in an organizational environment.
Well, what I find interesting is that it begins Heseg Handasi, meaning it's an engineering accomplishment.
Yes. Yes, basically what he reflects here, what he could clearly see through while reading the book, because management, management topics, libraries are written about management topics, and I distilled in a very fine, well, it took me a long time to do this, but in a very fine comb, I combed through all the topics and selected or extracted the must-have set of practices that I believe every manager should have, and he obviously concurs with my selection there.
All right. Now the next slide, we're having a multilingual show, is obviously the Spanish edition. How is this literally translated? Is it
well, the title here is different. The subtitle is the same, where it says Gestión Empresarial Explicada desde Dentro is the same as Management Explained from Within. But the title itself didn't work well translating it into Spanish. It sounded too perhaps religious, just by mentioning the word Dios, which means God. So my translator suggested that we will title it in something that means the same. And the literal translation of that title is Despacito, meaning slowly, slowly, y con buena letra, with down to the letter. Everything explained here down to the letter. So that's the literal translation of the Spanish version of the book.
Okay, and there's a reason I'm doing this way. Now we come to the English. So it's straightforward. Everybody can read it. My question for you is, this quote is in quotation marks. Who's the quote from?
No, actually, it's not a quote. This was just a decoration that the graphic designer put at the beginning. It is a statement from me. It's not a quote.
Okay.
And here I'm saying that this is really meant for both experienced and new managers, as not as a refresher, but a revisit of what it means to be a manager in today's environment.
Now, I want to go back to the Hebrew. Read the title in Hebrew.
למען השם, עבוד לפי הספר.
Okay. Avod is work. It could also work as a verb. It could also be a noun. Instead, you could translate from the English, instead of avod, avodah, meaning the noun work. You've got here, and I'm going to stop sharing. You've got here one book, 3 languages, 3 totally different cultures. Let's just say, for sake of argument, Anglo, Hispanic, and Israeli. The title didn't work in Spanish. You could have gone one or two, well, you wrote it in Hebrew. So you could have translated it a little bit differently in English, but you didn't have to. And that's just the title of the book. What about the content? What are the differences? Because a lot of people are interested in international work. And here we've got a book in 3 languages. What changes were necessary for the Spanish and Israeli, or the, yeah, I can say it that way, the Spanish, the Israeli, and the English-speaking audiences? What didn't work?
So, the subject, the differences were mainly in the verbal selection, in selecting certain, because I wrote the original version of the book was written in English. I wrote it in English. So all my phrases are English phrases, and some of the acronyms I used are very common in the United States, whereby in Spain, they don't like acronyms that much, especially not American acronyms.
I don't like acronyms either.
Yeah, so mainly the phrases and the linguistic choices were very important. And because I'm fairly fluent with Spanish, I was able to work with the translator and basically comb through every sentence and every word to make sure that the meaning crossed the culture and the languages. But the topic of cultures, I've been asked this question many, many times, and I see it in my work. And especially I saw it when I worked in India. In India, definitely there's a culture that you could clearly see.
I apologize. That has never happened before.
There's always the first time.
There's always the first time. I was watching the news a couple nights ago, and the reporter's phone went off. She was standing in front of the White House, and her ringtone was ducks quacking. And they had a lot of fun at her expense. So I thought I had turned it off. Obviously, I hadn't. I apologize. You were talking about culture.
Yeah, so where I clearly saw a difference in culture is when I worked with teams in India, both when I was still with EMC and later on with one of my clients, I had to go to Hyderabad in India, which is a big city with a lot of high-tech companies present there. And it's very visible. The initial interactions are clearly come out as a cultural difference, especially in something that I didn't quite like at the beginning, but I got used to it, is the veneration of anything that comes from the United States or Europe, from the West, what they call the West. And it took a couple of days to go through this cultural barrier and then to get comfortable with them, or more importantly, for them to get comfortable with me, and to see that I even reflect this in my book as a story. One of the stories that I tell in the book is once they realize that I'm not a super bomber B-52 coming here to bomb them with American practices, but more like going back to basics, understanding how they translate into their own culture, we clearly saw that the challenges are human challenges, work challenges, and they're no different anywhere in the world. Especially when it comes to technology-based environments, globalization has collected the entire world into one kitchen. So you could clearly see that the problems are universal. And the way to approach them, yes, they have a little bit of a nuance, cultural nuance, but no more than a nuance. And once you respect the local culture, there are no big differences. So coming back to your question, the main differences in having the book or publishing it in 3 different languages were pretty much linguistic and not so much cultural.
What would you say are the, let's say, because we've got about 15 minutes left, the 3 most critical lessons of the book?
I would say that there is one very critical lesson in the book for any reader, and that is that management is not something you can just flow with it, get the job, you have the position, and now you just flow with it. It's almost like a doctor coming fresh out of school without the internship period and saying, I've read everything in the books, I know everything. But we know it not only for medical doctors, we also know it for chefs in kitchens. We accept it very clearly that to become a chef, you have to go through years of practice, and there is no replacement to experience, hands-on experience. So the main lesson of the book is that there is a lot to learn. What happens in today's environment is that because the world is so unstable, the world of companies is so unstable, things change so fast, people find themselves in management positions having no idea what it entails. And what's even worse is that they don't recognize it. Because just once they receive the position, they were promoted into the position, they think very highly of themselves, very confident. I was chosen, here I am, better than others. And now they just flow naturally, and that's not the way to do it. There's a lot to study, especially in today's environments. The management position has become a lot more complicated than it used to be. And what my book is doing is trying to aid, to guide that person through all the chapters that are must, what I consider is a must know before you consider yourself apt for the management position. So it's one conclusion. Obviously, it breaks down to about 8 different main chapters with an intro and an end to the book. But 8 main chapters or clusters of knowledge that I consider must have for any manager or anybody who's aspiring to management positions.
What is the difference between a manager and a leader?
A manager has the position and the authority to command other people. If you take that definition in the most simplistic way, the manager has the authority to decide what to do, how to do, and the manager can tell people what to do, direct people what to do. A leader, on the other hand, is managing the work or the environment by influence, not by authority. Now, you might have a question mark in there, you know, the way I describe it, because we know leaders of very large organizations, and of course they can command others. But their real power comes from their ability to influence people and to influence many people. A leader has followers. A manager doesn't have to have followers. Now let's go to our work environment, today's work environment. The difference between a manager and a leader is actually kind of, you cannot be, in today's work environment, you cannot be a pure manager and you can't be a pure leader. You have to be both. And that's another very strong conclusion from reading my book. Because I emphasize it a lot. You cannot allow yourself to say, just give me work, give me a project, and I will know how to break it down into tasks and to send people to do those tasks. People don't work like this anymore. They don't agree to work like this anymore. They want to understand why they're supposed to do it. They want to understand the bigger picture. They want to be involved in decision-making, and that takes influence. So even though your management position might be kind of mid-level position or even low-level position like a team lead, you have to exercise leadership skills in order to do it effectively. And vice versa is also the same. You know, in technology companies, there's the position of a CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And in many cases, people think that that position is just a position of influence. All I need to do is to be smart. And everybody needs to see that I'm smart because I'm the Chief Technology Officer. And that's it. And if I say something, they should do it. Again, it's no longer acceptable. If you stay high above everything, people will look at you as somebody who is not anchored in real life, and therefore you won't be able to influence them. So you have to be both. You cannot allow yourself. And all we need to do is to take example from the biggest names in the field, like Bill Gates and other people of that rank, who always claim that they have one leg on the ground, right? Sometimes they go to the lab to play with the engineers. Why are they doing it? First, because they like it, but also because that helps them influence other people.
what or who is the manager managing? Do good managers manage people? Do they manage processes? What do they manage?
Well, the first lesson that I do sometimes with my clients is to explain to them that they manage up, sideways, down, front, and back. So what does it mean? If you're a manager, you're managing your boss, or sometimes several bosses, because people above you in the echelon of the organization have needs or requirements from your function. So you have to serve them. Obviously, you have to serve peers, because in today's work environment, everything is kind of meshed together. You cannot be just a services group because you are highly dependent on our engineering, and you cannot be purely engineering because you're highly dependent on what marketing wants. So the dependencies are really meshed together. So you have to understand your sides. And of course, downwards is the people who work on your team. If they're managers of other teams, so you're a manager of managers, or if you are just managing one team. So this is the up, sides, and down. What's in the front is the strategy of the company. So you have every manager of a unit, and it could be a front-end unit, a back-end unit. Every manager needs to understand the strategy of the company and derive from it a strategy for his own or her own group or organization. So that's the front, serving the strategy of the company. And in the back is the industry. What's happening? What are the trends of the industry? You have to serve that too. You have to be very alert to what's happening in the industry, because everything needs to match together like this, and front and back. So a manager is managing everything, the entire ecosystem. And the big thing is to understand the needs of this ecosystem in general.
Last question. I want to go back to the book and now the subtitle. Management Explained from Within. What do you mean by from within?
Basically, what I'm reflecting here is the fact that I have 30 years of management experience in 4 industries, 3 continents, many different types of experience. And I am reflecting in the book, not stuff that I read, but stuff that I read, practiced, and it worked for me. If there's a nice theory that I liked, but I didn't practice it because it didn't fit my situations, or because it didn't work for me, I wouldn't reflect it in the book. So the thing here is that it's not coming from models, or it's not coming from interviewing hundreds of managers. It's really from my own, from within, from my own work experience, very broad and deep experience. And now that I've done 10 years of coaching, I also have hundreds of people whom I have been coaching over the last 10 years that have experienced, so their accumulated experience or my experience in working with them with these practices basically is the foundation of that book. So that's what I meant, management explained from within the ranks, from within the trenches, not from academia. Even though I quote a lot of academic papers, stuff that worked for me or stuff that I experimented with.
Because the reason I asked the question was you mentioned that you were a consultant. So you could have looked at the topic from the perspective of an outsider, but that's not what you've done here.
So as a consultant, I'm not really an outsider type consultant. When I do consulting jobs, I actually am very hands-on. I become almost like a member of the management leadership team of the company. And I work as an executive coach from within. So I work with managers. I don't work with individual contributors. I work with managers in the company, mostly throughout the ranks, from the CEO of the company all the way down to team leads sometimes. But the idea is that I'm very hands-on with these people. I work with them on their challenges. It's not like a class, let's have an example from somewhere else. I will quote examples from other places, but I will help them translate that into their own work environment and what to do with their specific situations. So it is an outsider because I'm not an employee of the company, but I am contracted typically for a long duration, at least a year and a half, sometimes 3 years, and I become part of them. So it is a mix of insider, outsider, you could say.
Okay. Sarah, I want to thank you profusely for coming on. And as we're saying goodbye, I'm just going to share your contact information and wish you the best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
It was my pleasure. As always, I want to thank our viewers for watching. And as I like to say, please keep focused on success.